What time is it where you are, Vikram?
It is 8:30 in the evening. It's 8:30 p.m.
8:30. That means it's time to start.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Tony.
everyone. Hey, Tony. Welcome to the ACTO Forum. We are going to get started. For some of us, it's the top of the hour. For Vikram, it's right in the middle. And so my name is Jason Veliquit, and I've had the pleasure of being the ACTO Education Chair this year. And this forum that you are at right now is a conference preview. So we have three of our wonderful presenters on today who are going to give you just a taste of what they're going to present at the conference. And so if you're on the fence about coming or not, hopefully it'll help you make a decision to come. And if you are coming, hopefully it'll kind of just stoke the fire a little bit today. So before we get into the presenters, I just want to thank the Education Committee for a really great season of forums. And they are not all here today, but they have done a lot of work behind the scenes. And so Laura Elders, Teresa Poole, Vikram's been around. Hey, Vikram. And Amrita Singh. And so I just want to thank my committee for doing such a great job, and it's been a lot of fun. And if you want to join the Education Committee next year, love to have you. And our goal really is to bring in presenters and talk about the topics that are most important to you as a coach trainer to help our learning journey as coach trainers to keep growing and developing. And so that's kind of our sweet spot of who we're looking for presenters for these forums. If you don't want to go all the way with us and be on our committee, you're always more than welcome to send ideas of presenters. We welcome that. And I'll put my email address in the little chat box here if you want to send me a note with maybe some ideas for this next season. Like I said, this is a conference preview, and the conference is coming up in just a few short weeks, June 10 through 14. Hallie's excited, and so it's going to be a really great time. I'm going to give a little bit of parameters here for our presenters this morning, but Hallie, would you like to say a word or two about the conference in general?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, and not most importantly, but the conference is going to be in my hometown, which is Victoria, British Columbia, which that is not a photograph of Victoria, British Columbia, but it may as well be. Very beautiful place in the world to be. So that's one thing. But I also, more importantly, is a pretty groundbreaking conference in a lot of ways for ACTO. We have really blown up what conferences look like for ACTO this year. And the intention from the very beginning was to encourage and find diversity, both in terms of the speakers and in the content. And we have done that very successfully. We're blown away by the number of proposals that we got, people that wanted to participate. I actually just got one yesterday saying, which has been happening all the way along, can I present? But our presenters have been chosen for several months. So I'm very, very excited about what's going to transpire at the conference. The small goal is that it changes the face of the coaching profession just a little bit. So, and I also wanted to mention that Rashmi is also on the call, and she's one of the presenter groups along with Vikram Leadership That Works. So, yeah, it's going to be exciting, and I'm very excited to see a little taste test of what Steve and Michelle and Rashmi and Vikram have to say today. So that's about it.
Thank you, Hallie. If you know Hallie, she's a great leader, and she has put her heart and soul into this conference, and it's going to be quite the event. And so here we go. We'll get a little taste today. So I'd like to just set this up a little bit. And so we have 3 groups of presenters today. And what I'd like the presenters to do is just, share for 7 or 10 minutes around that of what you'll be talking about, just to give the group a little bit of a preview. And then if you'd like for some conversation or question, that is always welcome. And so in my mind, each of you have about 10 minutes or so to present, and then a few minutes for some questions. And I am going to read your cultural bios that are on the website, and then you could take it away. And so this is the order for today. And I'm going to have Michelle, you get to go first and lead off. And then Steve, you're going to go second. And then Vikram, and it sounds like Rashmi, you'll be last, but certainly not least. So that's the order. And let me introduce for you all Michelle. And so let me read this bio here. Let's see here. Michelle Vanderstouw. How do you Stowe?
You said it correct the first time, which is an amazing feat. Vanderstouw, like cow.
Totally
It's
lucky.
Dutch.
Michelle is a survivor, a woman, a wife, partner, mother, master facilitator, thought partner, coach, dancer, empath, strategic planner, organizational development professional, loves hiking and nature, cooking, speaking other languages, dabbled in 9 so far, and travel. First and almost only to go to college, mom and stepdad didn't finish high school. Has a non-visible disability, personal beliefs are diverse from majority of her family, an ally, an advocate. Can full-time summer work at age 8 in concession stands at county fairs. Held positions as accountant, paralegal, organic chemist, graphic designer, foundation program officer, coach, researcher, evaluator, and entrepreneur. Michelle, welcome.
So I never knew that was going to be read out loud. Sounds a little different when you read it than when you read it out loud than when I wrote it down, just trying to capture all of my different aspects of culture. So thank you very much for the invitation to share a little bit about what we're going to be working on and experiencing together with folks who come to the ACTO conference. And when I say we, Angela Cusack is my partner in crime, and she will definitely be there with me during our session. And when we saw the ACTO conference invitation for speakers, we were really inspired. We were thinking about something that we would like to work on, and what I'd like to share today is just a little bit of what came first for us in developing our session, and then a highlight of what we're going to be doing during our session. So we know, obviously, all of us know that our blind spots, implicit bias, our strengths, and our weakness all come with us as we go about daily life. And certainly when we coach or when we teach others to coach. And we are living in a system which makes it really difficult for people to enter into a relationship with another person with the constant intention of honoring their beliefs, customs, and values. Without cultural humility, we are not able to live in the fullness of what is possible. And we often may harm others on our way, through our life and through our journey. So we believe that it's really critical to engage in cultural humility, which is, of course, very much in alignment with the ACTO Stand on Diversity. I've looked at that document so many times, and I just keep finding ways that the two intersect. From a broader perspective, and when we think about the polarization that's going on in the United States and really in the world, including dehumanization of individuals and groups of people, we recognize, so Angela and I recognize that we really need a significant shift. And so we were thinking, how can we help this world? And the answer that we came to is that attending to cultural humility would produce a very rich awakening that could reduce systemic and also personal bias. So that's our bold claim. You can jump in with us or at least come practice a little bit. It's our belief that coach training organizations can instigate exponential change. So we see the coach training organizations as really the strength and something that connects us across the world, and that this will impact our world, of course. And we feel that if coach training organizations were intentionally incorporating cultural humility as core to their training programs, coaches that are trained would both be able to see and also be seen differently, which would not only improve coaching quality, but by doing that, also improve the world. So in terms of what we'll be covering in our session, during 1,000 Cultures and Beyond, Practicing Cultural Humility, we'll do more than offer a definition of cultural humility and discuss how it differs from cultural awareness or cultural competence, because it does differ. We will attend to 3 main areas. So the first is self, making the invisible visible. Let me say that again, making the invisible visible. Next, we will tend to others. So shifting to an other-oriented perspective. And then finally, the world, making cultural humility mainstream. During our session, it will be very experiential, not a lot of talking at you, a lot of doing work together. And what we hope is that the experiences that those who are in the room go through, they can then replicate them in their coach training schools to help coaches practice embodying cultural humility and doing the necessary work on self. And we hope schools will be inspired to take the work further and institutionalize cultural humility within the organizations. So one of the things that Angela and I have learned as we've spent countless hours working together on our offering is that this work can be highly disruptive. We've experienced it very much personally as we've dived deeper and deeper into what does it mean to be culturally humble? What does it mean for me to be walking on this earth and be culturally humble on a day-to-day basis? What I've learned is that it's not an easy task, and it's truly a journey, and it's certainly not one for the faint of heart. So I'm not certain whether we can ever fully arrive or become culturally humble, but we will move in and out of that state. So that is kind of an overview of the why and what we hope to be doing. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting all of you in Victoria. And I'm open to answering any questions that you might have about the experience.
Where did the concept come from?
There, back in the 70s, there were some folks in the healthcare arena who really began the work. And honestly, my background is in health and healthcare, health funding actually. And so I have been more cognizant of cultural humility than a lot of other folks. So you see it a lot in healthcare. So how one interacts with patients. So for example, there is a spectrum from cultural awareness to cultural competence to cultural humility. Not a complete, there's some overlap, but let's say there's a spectrum. And if a physician does the outer work to learn about their patients. So in our community, we're the second largest Somali community in the nation. And I think we're first in, is it Hmong? There's another one that we are the first in, and a new community group that came to our community, a new group that came to our community. And with a doctor, they may learn, okay, so this is what I know about about the folks who are coming in and seeing me. I can expect this from a Somali patient. And they may be culturally aware, they may have been trying to work on their competence, but in order to really stand in a place of cultural humility, you have to, in some sense, let go of that a little bit and really just look at that person as an individual, not just a member of a group. So healthcare has done enormous work in this area, but it's really we're really on an edge. There's not a lot written. There's not a lot codified. And frankly, during the conference, we're going to be put forth a definition that we have developed based on everything else that's been out there. And we're going to want input from folks who are in the room to help advance that and improve it.
Michelle, I wanted to ask you a question. Great, thank you. I really love what you had to say. The distinction between humility and competence, is competence more on very explicit task, skill, capability type of abilities, I guess, versus humility? Is humility more on the heart soul side? Can you help me with that distinction a little bit?
So I'll give you a tidbit, because I could talk about this for far too long. And I'm learning. So I'm going to definitely own that I'm a student in this, and I'm going to continue to be a student, I have a feeling, for a very long time. So cultural competence is the development of an ability to interact effectively with people different than self, different race, different religion, different values, different in so many different ways, we could say, different lifestyles, whatever. Whereas the cultural humility, one piece that we have that is really necessary is, and you kind of touched on it, is not only the self-work to understand yourself, but understanding what we're carrying in our backpack. So we carry every experience that we have had and walked through our life with, but we often don't really look at that and how that provides lenses through which we look at those who are across the table from us. We also, if I think about embodiment, so here's the part you mentioned, heart. So we definitely, in coaching, we teach about heart center, opening up and having that space. What I haven't experienced, and maybe some coaching programs are teaching this, but we haven't taught about opening up the backside and being engaged while we're in with someone, both opening and softening in the front and softening in the back. So, that sense of, you can have an embodied sense of what it feels to be culturally humble. And then there's also that brain part too that goes on. Is that helpful, or did that just confuse you more?
Well, it made me more curious to go deeper into that. So I am curious about the whole humility piece. I've seen it and read about it, but yeah, those distinctions are important, but I think they all are interconnected, and there's an intersectionality with all of them.
You are absolutely correct. And I have to tell you, it's a dangerous, to start engaging with this topic. When I said disruptive, on morning walks, morning meditation, you're trying to clear your mind, and all of a sudden you see another connection, or you see something that you've done in the past again, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Then there's that. And reading the book by Robin DiAngelo, everything I'm reading there, that's opening up a whole new frame for me about my privileged whiteness that intersects with it. So, oh my heavens. Yeah, so much.
Thank you.
I just put in the chat there, when I first learned about cultural humility, was from someone else in the healthcare industry. And I started reading, and if you Google cultural humility in Wikipedia, there's a great table there that compares cultural competence to cultural humility, and how it sort of helped me wrap my head around what some of the differences in how people are thinking about those concepts. So
That's good.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. That does a decent job, and there are some links within that wiki that do a decent job. And we've taken that and lots of reading in psychological journals and lots of other things and kind of evolved. So it'll be that, and then the Angela Michelle spin on it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Michelle, and your partner here, Angela, wasn't able to join today, but you will be co-leading your presentation. And so thank you for giving us that snippet and for the questions. I think is a good place to transition to our next presenter. I think there's enough curiosity there to get people to think about going to your presentation. So thank you very much for being here and sharing. Steve, how are you? You're going to be up next. I'm going to read your bio if that's all right with you.
All 5 seconds of it.
Yeah, I'll read it really slowly with lots of emphasis. Steve Galloway is an African-American Black husband, father, son, brother, man, graduate degreed professional, facilitator of positive individual, group, and organizational change. And he is a believer in the universal value of all. And so, Steve, it is wonderful to have you here today. And I do have those slides ready if you want to share them. So just let me know.
Great. And just right before you do that, Jason, I'd like to share with the group that just from listening to Michelle's, it just confirmed for me, Michelle's presentation just confirmed for me, just again, the linkage and the common thread that I'm believing that most of our presentations will have. And thank you, Hallie, and also ACTO for bringing this to really the fore. I certainly believe that this topic, the things that we're going to be speaking about, we've reached a tipping point to some degree in our society. And certainly for me personally, I am willing to be more vulnerable in where I am with this now, and a little more outspoken about it. And I think that's something that we all need. And if I'm claiming to be that positive change leader that Jason read and mentioned in the bio, then I really need to live this. And so thank you for the opportunity to do so. And I love, thank you, Hallie, for sending out the offer and the invitation to be a provocateur. I think some of us saw that. And I am almost daily writing on my notepad when I start my day. I am a provocateur in probably many ways, and I'm embracing that. So thank you for putting that out there for me. So that's my little opening thank you statement to you all. And I will just actually, in this presentation for the next 10 minutes or so, hopefully I can do that in 7 minutes, Jason, is just actually walk you through just experientially. And so as you walk through experientially, as I know you all will, because you're great coaches and trainers of coaches, that you'll reflect on that. So let's just get right to it and we'll walk through it as if we're actually engaging in it. Okay? Thanks, Jason. All right, that is the title. And next slide, just one click. And so I want to ask you all, just, and we're just popcorn around the group before we go any further. What's colorblindness? When you hear the term colorblind or being colorblind in the context of our theme for our conference, that's what I'm talking about. What comes to mind? What do you think? Just can we quickly get some responses from
And you might have to take yourself off of mute. And so make sure you do that.
Steve,
Often claimed and not possible
Okay.
unless you physically are colorblind.
And this is Brighton, kind of like something that we maybe strive for, but is not, like Hallie said, is not real. We hope to, or we claim it.
Yeah. This is Vikram here. When I see color, I believe I don't see it.
This is Michael. Racism.
Mm-hmm. Others?
For me, it's ignorance.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Ignorance.
Ignorance of what?
Ignorance of self, ignorance of stuff around you, just being ignorant, wanting to wear the, not wanting to allow yourself to see who you are and who the other person is fully, so that you can live in that ignorance and in, some sort of a illusionary world.
Mm-hmm. Michael, was it you, Michael, who said racism? Who was that who said racism?
It was Michael.
Can you share more with us about that?
It's about it's a way of denying the existence of systemic oppression around color.
Okay. Okay.
I.e., I don't see color.
Oh, if someone says, I don't see color.
Yeah.
And for what purpose would they say something like that, perhaps, Hallie?
Usually to cover ignorance. They just don't know, like they just haven't had the exposure to know that that's actually, to somebody who is a different color than they are, that actually is denial of who they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And perhaps maybe even to make them more comfortable themselves, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move ahead. So just go with the next. I think it's a drop down in there. I like to use this definition, and I forgot on the slide to attribute it, but Daryl Wing Su, you all may be familiar with him. He's a great educator, has done lots of work in this arena, but I'll just quickly read this. His definition for colorblindness. Colorblindness emphasizes similarity and assimilation, which has been the dominant mode regarding race in the United States since the 1960s. Colorblindness presumes a universal sameness and similarities among, sorry for the typo, all people, and it argues that race and culture are largely irrelevant and that people should be understood as individuals, not identity group members. Downplays the existence of the current day discrimination and racism, seeing them as vestiges of the past. So I think combined, all of our definitions and descriptions of what colorblindness is probably here in this definition. Let's go to our next slide. Yeah, Daryl Wing Su, okay. So we've just defined colorblindness. So what is coaching and the purpose of the coach trainer? Just let's popcorn around that too. I know that's a tough one maybe, but so what is coaching? Why are we doing it? What is it? What's our purpose? And when was the last time you answered this question for yourself, perhaps? But what's coaching? What's this all about? One or two, three words.
I think for me, it's about change and hope that my client can get to the transformation that they want.
Mm-hmm. Others?
For me, is to accompany the inner dialogue of the client in order to achieve some goals and through his or her own evolution, inner evolution.
Mm-hmm. Can we get a couple more?
So for me, it's moving from ignorance to awareness.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's give some questions to open the eyes, to look around and expand himself.
And what's your purpose as a coach trainer, and most likely, and obviously you are a coach yourself. So what's your purpose? Is there something different about that? Your purpose? What is it that you do as a coach or are called to do for that individual?
I wanted to hear from Kristen. She.
Thank you. Yeah, I got cut off a couple times, but that's okay. I'll answer both. I use two quotes to share what I believe the essence of coaching is. And one is Joseph Campbell, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." And the second is Yoko Ono, "We change the world by being ourselves." And I've been in this inquiry lately since I've been exploring my own privilege and what it actually means to change the world. And so now, to me, the purpose of a coach and being a coach trainer is both the internal work. And I think it was Rashmi that said, going from ignorance to awareness. So it's raising consciousness, bringing what's invisible within oneself visible. And so I believe as a coach trainer, that's what we do. And it's both on an individual and a systemic or structural level, I think is our responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And just my final question with that for all of you, it's in service of what? So we do all of these things, coaching are all of these things, but it's in service to what?
See, the answer that comes to me is life.
Interesting background. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think for me that if you would ask me 5-10 years ago, I would have a very different answer than I do now. And it's constantly in flux, and it's actually a point of tension or confusion for me about actually what my role as a coach is, particularly in the conversation about identity and culture. So the trite or surface answer is, sorry, Steve.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, part of what motivated me to push this agenda is that we say as coaches that in our coaching relationships, we provide a place for people to show up as all of who they are. And I don't think we necessarily do that yet. So, but more than that, all of who they are and all of who they don't know, they need to be. So that's the little extension that I'm maybe adding now. So
Okay, yeah, great. All of your responses for all of you were great. Jason, let's see what we have here next. If you hit that, these are just a few things that I just picked up and just wanted to throw in. And in addition to everything that you all said, it's a partnership that maximizes human potential. Some of the things that we do that enable that are, we listen, we observe, we ask those empowering questions, we encourage, we reflect, and we see and hear to help people clarify their objectives. We're co-creators of relationships and invite, something I think you just said, Hallie, we invite clients to bring their whole selves and authentic selves in service to their growth and development. And I think we said all of that. All of us said all of those things. And so we started with definition of colorblindness. Now we're kind of defining what coaching is all about and our purpose for coaching. Jason, let's go to the next one, please. I think we all would agree that prejudice, bias, oppression, discrimination, racism, all of those things are very real in our world and in our societies, no matter where we are, even if we're talking just the United States. But these things exist throughout the world, in every culture, every corner of the world. That's probably a given. I think we can agree with that. Jason, next slide, please. What I'm thinking about is, what is the opposite of color blindness? And so it would be color cognizance. So in this definition, cognizance combines the awareness of the profound impact of race and ethnicities on individuals and communities, a belief in the richness of racial and cultural heritage, and the acknowledgement of prejudice, discrimination, and racism that has a real impact in the lives of people of color. And I'm going to add in for all people. It's not just for people of color, but I believe that these things impact everyone in some way or another. So let's move to the next slide, Jason. I want you to think about that. So when we looked at the definition of colorblindness, and we looked at the definition of coaching and some of the things that relate to coaching, does coaching align with the activities and the beliefs of colorblindness? And if so, how? May be hard to read, but we kind of have those definitions there, those things we put up before. Do they align? And if so, how? Or if not, why not?
I think how coaching is currently set up is it aligns by omission. So because we don't currently, in our definition of coaching, ask the coach to look at their own bias. We don't currently ask them to ask the client's questions about that, or where, identity is impacting them. It's kind of missing from the definition of coaching and the purpose of the coach for me. It's
okay. Other perspectives?
Well, I believe this Vikram, coaching has an implicit bias to be colorblind. It need not be, but is, because it presumes that everybody has the same equity to act and impact their lives if you ask the right questions and you engage in an empowering conversation. So I do believe that if the definition of coaching is just limited to that and it does not take the system of a person into account, and hence lack of privilege or the oppression, there's exclusion right there. And so it's colorblind.
Okay. Others? Any other perspectives? Colorblindness, in my opinion, does not recognize the wholeness and the fullness of one's lived experience and one's potential. Coaching, on the other hand, and the messages that I've received is that that's what coaching, one of its primary aims is for the growth and development and the maximization and opportunity for one to be their full, authentic selves. Yet, based on what you've just said, a few of you have just said that we don't really embrace that truly. And there may be some people that don't really have the opportunity to experience that because our coaching approach is colorblind, or maybe leaning more toward the colorblind side rather than the color cognizant side. I want just any opinions or perspectives on what I just said at all. Agree, disagree, have a different perspective on that?
I agree with you, and I agree that there is, in addition to color blindness, there's other blindness to marginalized, oppressed groups, to the intersectionality of it. So the yes and what you're saying.
Okay. Next slide. Great, thank you. Don't want to overprocess this. Is there one more? Okay. So great. We were doing all this. We've recognized that there's color blindness, color cognizance. So what is it that we can do, coaches, coach trainers can do to be more color cognizant? You remember that definition, really it's the opposite of color blindness. So what are some things that we can do? I think, and Michelle, you spoke about in your cultural humility presentation, there's the self part.
Yeah.
I think that the most important tool that we have in our coach trainer toolbox, in my opinion, is the effective use of self, which is about self-awareness. And if we're not open, and if we're not truly our best selves and all that that means, and aware and cognizant and understanding of others and the situation that others may be in and the context within which they live and breathe, then we may not be the most effective coach that we can be, particularly in those populations that experience those things. So our own assessment and cultural awareness, our own attitudes and beliefs, really looking at that, holding up that mirror and looking and actively engaging in the process of becoming more aware of our own stories, beliefs, values, opinions, perspectives, particularly about others. Another thing that we can do is to understand cultural context. Where are we? What are we in? The increase our knowledge of others, their lived experiences, actively seek to learn about and acknowledge the cultural dynamics that take place. I am particularly interested in helping others to see particularly the American racial context and history and how that has shaped much of the way we interact and act in our daily lives. The whole systemic piece, I think someone talked about that, and looking at that. And then finally, building skill. So these are actually, actively looking to practice, actually looking to engage, actively looking to seek, relevant tools and activities and resources that help us be more cognizant. So I'd like to end it there. I know that's been probably longer than 10 minutes, but I wanted us to just kind of go through that experience and then maybe even later reflect on that. As I close, I want to also really acknowledge and share with you all that my perspective, while I understand and I appreciate all the myriad of identities that we have, I am personally focusing on the identity of race, because I believe that that is one identity that is, one of the most uncomfortable to discuss, one of the most unspoken identities, and one that really needs a lot of work. And just personally, I just have a lot of passion around that one. And I want to really focus my presentation and my efforts going forward on working on the race side of identity, and also primarily in the context of the dynamics of the American race story. So I just want to let you all know basically where I'm coming from and what my intentions are. So I'll end it there.
Wonderful.
If you have any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your passion. It's obviously coming through. And both the presenters today, I'm kind of sitting back thinking, okay, let's keep going, and keep diving into these things. And so thank you for sharing a bit of your presentation. I think I'm going to move to the next presenter. Just make sure we give Vikram enough time. And it's getting late, I think, maybe for you, Vikram. And so, Vikram, let me read your bio here, and then I'll pass it over to you. And so, Vikram is passionate about creating communities based on principles of inclusion, equality, and human potential. His vision is to bring the energy or love and evolution to the work of power and equity across the world. So Vikram, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. And thank you, Steve. I really enjoyed how you led us through this. And thank you, Michelle, for setting the context. I'm the privileged one to go the last, so I get to ride on what you shared, and that's really a sweet privilege to have today. Yeah, and before I move ahead, Steve, I just want to share the impact of your conversation and your inquiry that is left for me, which is I'm just translating in my mind and in my heart, how do I translate color blindness to my country, and what other forms of blindness like Kristen shared exist, and how can I bring the same cognizance? So that's very provocative for me. So thank you. I have Michael, I have Rashmi. They belong to Leadership That Works. I'm really happy that you're here as well. And Rashmi will be with me presenting in the conference. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Hallie, for this opportunity. At Leadership That Works, which is a coaching school, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've been on a journey of bringing coach training and the work of looking at isms and hence biases and hence oppression and all the differentials that happen due to rank into the coach training awareness and in our curriculum. And so really there are 3 layers that we've been working and in many ways struggling through and learning. If the end layer is the impact on coaches or would-be coaches through the training, there is one layer behind that, which is the community that teaches coaching, and hence what is the work we need to do for ourselves. And then there's a further layer, what is the power or what is the structure that holds this community or excludes some identities from this community. And so if you kind of go 3 layers back, what we want to offer in our presentation is the middle layer and the layer behind the middle layer of what our own biases or lack of it, how do they inform this work. And we are very excited because we want this to be a live inquiry. It's work in progress for us. So what I'm going to be presenting here and what might show up there might be very different because there's a dialogue going on in the background about what we should and what we are offering back. So that's a core intention of what we are sharing. And I've prepared a couple of slides. What I want to do is typically what would probably be happening in the middle of the presentation, which is a couple of insights and 3 questions that we as a community at Leadership That Works are holding for ourselves globally. And just to give you a context, the big presence of Leadership That Works is in the US and in India. And then there are small pockets of presence in Mexico, in Europe, in Thailand, in Hong Kong, in the Middle East. So large hubs in these 2 countries and then some small hubs building around these countries. So I'm just going to share a slide set that I have. Bear with me for a moment. And here's what I want to share. So there are 6 insights that I want to share that is important for coach trainers, or what we have understood is really, really important for us. And Steve, you spoke to this. Michelle, you spoke to this when you talked about cultural humility. So that kind of really resonated with me. We believe in a very naive and utopian way that if people have choices and they can see a positive, and if they're able to make those choices, they will see a positive impact in their lives. But as we have integrated this work into coach training, what we realized is the ability to have a choice and have a positive or a desired impact is a factor of how much inherent privilege you have in the system that you exist in. The lesser the privilege or more the exclusion, there's going to be so much more struggle to find that result. So it's not just about choice making. It's also about realizing the context and the degree of exclusion from the center that one is in. And so when we are coaching, we are not only coaching the person, but in an indirect and in a highly influential way, we're also coaching the system that the person identifies with. And I often see that in India when you're coaching a woman versus a man. and what inherently a woman gives herself as the right to be versus what inherently a man gives himself the right to be, because sexism is very prevalent, or patriarchy is very prevalent. What we have learned is that many of the students that we teach have more wisdom about this work than we have. And so very interestingly, the whole idea of a teacher teaching something or a facilitator facilitating an outcome collapses, because the whole idea of expertise, just drops out right there at the center of the room. It's all together living this chaos. So we learned very early on that in order to teach this work, we must live our inquiry. And hence we must address our isms, our ignorance of how different cultures function. One curriculum applying across the world is disrespectful, or one way of teaching being taught across the world excludes. What our leadership and Leadership That Works has done really beautifully, and what we continue to do, is to call out our own implicit biases. Just to give you an example, some of the content in the curriculum is how do you market coaching, or how do you set up your practice? And the way you set it up in India is very different from the way you set it up in North America. And I think extremely different in Thailand, even though India and Thailand are quite close by. It's just a 4-hour flight. So even how you pitch for your coaching and how to teach that has to be different. It has to be where the culture is. Relationship with money is very different across cultures. And so how does one even charge for coaching, and how do you teach that? I was very curious about this when Michelle, you were sharing, which is about the roots of how we use language. And when we really touch cultural humility, language has played a big part in oppression and conditioning us to think in a particular way. Language codes how we think. And so what I've often found, and what a lot of my colleagues have found, is language can be limiting. And so how can we do this work, which is about constructing powerful questions and everything around that? Really, I'm oversimplifying coaching. If language itself has been a tool of assimilating and making everybody similar, right? So these are some of the insights we've had. We've also learned that resistance and divergence is essential. And there have to be multiple ways of looking at coaching frameworks, not just one model or one framework. And that's a bias that we are learning to confront for ourselves, because a lot of coaching and the way coaching is understood was born in North America, at least as much as I understand. And how can something that was born in one place in the world truly become universal if it does not include other ways of looking at it? And that's the place we are in. And we want to share this with everyone. We don't know what the answers are, but this is the struggle we are in. How do we truly make it plural? How do we truly make it global? So the last point is really important, which is in our own school, the leadership, we found it was really, really important to take a stand for how to view power and share power. So the stand was not about how we'll teach coaching, but the stand was about how do we hold power as a community and how do we live that? I'm just going to pause here to see if there are any reflections, any questions, anything you'd like to add, because the next slide, I'll share the 3 questions that really have defined our work so far in this. And that's what we want to bring back to the conference. But before I go ahead, I'm just going to pause here to see, or respond or add if you have something to add, or if you see something differently or disagree, really welcome.
Vikram, I'm curious to learn more about the student wisdom, and if you don't have time today, then I'll certainly follow up with you at the conference on that. But I'd like to know a little bit more about that, and it might be.
Yeah, sure. I can give a couple of examples. So we had a couple of Middle Eastern women joining our course, one Egyptian and both of them Egyptian, really. And there's this whole thing about body wisdom in coaching, and how does it feel in your body? And just that question created so much of shame. And they had to teach us about what are the cultural rituals to even talk about the body before you get the permission to even ask that question as a coach.
Powerful. Mm-hmm.
And it all started with laughter. And if as coach trainers, we were not curious enough at that moment to understand what the laughter meant, it would have gone completely unnoticed. So that's one possible example. And you know, as a community, we're building a set of examples that we want to share. But
so now you've struck fear in my heart because we're doing somatic work during our session. So now I will have to be very careful with this.
Or learn in the moment and acknowledge that.
Oh, absolutely. And we are fully prepared to have our session be us learning session rather than us teaching session. That's kind of how we're holding this going into it. So thank you for that, Vikram.
No, Michelle, you said this is disruptive work, right? So I often go into the room saying, I'm going to upset somebody here. And I want to ask, and I want to seek permission so that upset can come back for me and for them to learn together. So thank
Absolutely.
you for sharing.
That's how we're holding it. Absolutely.
So I'm going to move to the next slide, and then maybe we can have some time to kind of build on this based on how much time is left, Jason. So there are 3 questions that really we are asking ourselves as a coach training school and as coach trainers. The first one is this work, whatever you may call it, with different language. And, you know, sometimes you've had strong reactions to the word oppression, and sometimes you have had amazing celebration that the word oppression is part of this work. And I don't have a position on it. I just love that we can talk about it. So one thing that we have learned there is that the curriculum has to be different, or the treatment of curriculum has to be different. The cultures which don't like too many questions being asked until there is intimacy, the entry into coaching has to be very different. And there are cultures where being outspoken is respected, and there are cultures where deference to a coach is the norm. So how does the coach even level and understand the rank and the privilege they bring in, just because they hold the identity of a coach? What we've learned is that if we want to integrate this work, then the accountability actions that a coach sets for the client, the coach has to learn, and hence we have to teach or facilitate actions that also deal with power differentials and the impact of power differentials. So they're just not individual actions, they're also systemic actions. And the more the leaders who hold power in systems do this, the more the transformation happens. I already spoke about language. I think the other 2 questions are really, really important for us as coach trainers, which is what compels us to take a stand. And here's where there was a big dialogue and also debate that happened in our community, has been happening about, are we a coach training school, or are we a social justice organization, or do we stand for equity? Will we have less students coming in because we are doing this work? And right at the center of that conversation is a dialogue or an inquiry which says that if coaching is serving, the fundamental question that was asked by you, Steve, what purpose are we serving? And if we are serving a certain purpose or for making it a different world, then there has to be a stand against oppression. And that will have a financial impact, and that will have an impact on the brand. And that is equally important to integrate and stand for. The other question that we are asking is who gets coaching and who gets to coach? And what I'm very excited to share is that as part of our presentation, we're going to be talking about 2 applications, where one is in the US in Lancaster prison. We've done some work on coaching and coach training. And the other is in India, my colleague Altaf, who's not here today because he's fasting, it's the Ramzan month, does some work with women who have been trafficked and who have been left on the streets. And there's coach training and coaching happening there. And so it's almost as a stand that as much as we teach coaching to people who can afford to pay for this, it's almost a stand to go and teach coaching and to coach in places where financial wealth is not an equity, where there are other forms of wealth other than financial wealth that exist. And so what does it mean for us to live the inquiry? As leaders, as people who design the curriculum, as somebody who teaches it, as a community that holds it together or learns together, it's to stand in the fire. It's to know that we don't know. And accept, and this has been the most humbling and also the most confronting thought, that if one believes that one is at the center of this, it means one is also, somebody else is not at the center. And how does the person who's at the center of teaching this, even in our little world of influence, how do we ensure that we bring that voice and choice into the center that we've just excluded by being in the center? So these have been some of the dilemmas. These have been some of the inquiries that we've been living with. That's all I have to share for today, and really open to Jason how you want to hold time here, whether there's space for questions or reflections, or otherwise there's going to be more of this coming in the presentation with examples and with interaction.
Yeah, I think we are at the end of our time, and thank you, Vikram. I think I will be thinking about all three of these presentations all day, and so and the thread is it's beautiful to see the thread and the connections. And so to Michelle and Steve and Vikram, thank you for presenting today, and I hope you can join the conference. Also, I think maybe you've noticed too, there's a live streaming option that is out there as well. And so trying to get this content out there to as big of audiences as we can. And so thank you all, and thank you for being at the forum. And we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Vikram, may I have the slides? Vikram, may I have the...
Yeah, I'll send it.
Okay.
Everyone will get everything. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Hallie. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.
Great
Thanks,
session.
everyone. Have a nice day.